Then give the council the truth, Elena said, and the fear in her voice disappeared before anyone could mistake it for weakness. Celeste's smile faltered as Elena released Matteo's hand and picked up the phone that had recorded the entire confrontation. The screen still showed the active video call from the threat against her mother, along with Celeste's face, the false medication line, and her confession about Bianca's plan. The call never ended, Elena said. Everything you said was transmitted to hospital security. Vincent immediately connected the phone to the private council meeting being held across Manhattan. Within seconds, a large monitor on the wall displayed 12 powerful men seated around a polished table. At the center sat Carlo DeLuca, Matteo's uncle and temporary council chairman, who had spent years waiting for his nephew to appear weak. "Matteo," Carlo said coldly, "the evidence shows Nurse Brooks entered the pharmacy, attended the charity dinner, and arranged the poisoning. Your judgment has clearly been compromised." Elena stepped into view before Matteo could answer. She was still wearing navy scrubs beneath his black jacket, her hair disheveled from the long night, but she stood straighter than anyone in the room. The woman in those recordings was Celeste Marino, wearing my uniform and badge. Dr. Vale can confirm she supplied the contaminated syringe and hospital security has her confession. Carlo barely glanced at her. This council does not take testimony from hospital staff. Matteo moved beside Elena, close enough that their shoulders touched. Then this council no longer speaks for me. Carlo's expression hardened. You would sacrifice generations of power for a woman you met tonight? I met her 11 years ago when she saved my life without knowing my name. Matteo removed Elena's old nursing school badge from beneath his gown and held it toward the camera. Tonight she saved me again because she noticed what every specialist ignored. She identified the false medication line, uncovered the staged footage, and protected her mother while poisoned men and frightened doctors followed orders. Do not call her a weakness simply because none of you possess her courage. Bianca stepped toward the monitor. The Moretti family will withdraw every agreement if you continue this humiliation. Vincent placed a folder beside the phone. The hospital's financial records show payments from a Moretti-controlled company to Celeste and Dr. Vale. The transfers began 3 weeks ago. Vale lowered his head. I will testify. Bianca threatened my daughter and ordered me to administer the second dose. Bianca's confidence finally broke. He is lying. Elena looked directly at her. No, you believed no one would listen to me because I was a nurse without money, influence, or the right appearance for your world. You believed people would see my body before they saw the evidence. Elena's voice shook once, but she did not look away. You were right about how cruel people can be. You were wrong about me remaining silent. The council chamber erupted as Vincent transmitted the recordings, payment records, and security footage. Carlo attempted to end the call, but 3 council members demanded an immediate investigation. Within minutes, the alliance vote was suspended. Bianca's family accounts connected to the hospital were frozen, and police investigators were summoned to take custody of Celeste and Dr. Vale. Bianca was escorted away without another word. Matteo watched until the doors closed, then his strength finally failed. Elena caught him before he hit the floor. Matteo, look at me. His breathing was shallow again, but his eyes found hers. You stayed. I told you I would. She guided him into a chair while the medical team returned with verified medication. This time, Matteo allowed them to work because Elena checked every label beside them. By sunrise, his temperature was normal and the poison was clearing from his system. Elena's mother was safe in a guarded room, and Dr. Vale's daughter was rescued from a warehouse in New Jersey after he revealed her location. 2 days later, Matteo stood beside Elena in the hospital's quiet rooftop garden. Morning sunlight warmed the city and no guards stood close enough to hear them. Your mother's medical bills have been paid, he said. Elena folded her arms. I did not ask you to buy my gratitude. It was not payment, it was protection. Then let me choose whether to accept it. Matteo nodded immediately. That simple respect touched her more than any expensive gesture could have. He held out her old nursing badge. I kept this because it reminded me that kindness could exist without a price. Elena took it, but he did not release her hand. I spent years believing I was easy to overlook, she admitted. Matteo stepped closer. You were never difficult to love, Elena. You were surrounded by people too blind to recognize you. He lifted her hand to his lips, not as a mafia boss claiming possession, but as a man asking permission to begin again. Months later, Elena became director of a foundation protecting— We are not going to the rooftop, Vincent said, but Matteo was already pulling the IV from his arm. Blood spotted the white tape at his wrist as the emergency lights painted the room in a dim red glow. They have Elena's mother, Matteo replied. Then it is a trap. Of course it is. His voice remained cold, controlled, and certain. The mistake would be believing they are the only ones who prepared for tonight. Elena stepped in front of him before he could reach the door. Matteo's black jacket still covered her shoulders, making her look smaller beneath its weight, but there was nothing weak in the way she held his gaze. You were poisoned less than 4 hours ago. You cannot walk onto that roof. I can if it keeps your mother alive. And what happens when they kill you anyway? They will not. You do not know that. Matteo looked at her as the monitor alarm continued behind him. I know they want me alive long enough to sign the Moretti alliance. Bianca's face lost its colour. Vincent turned toward her. The agreement. Matteo nodded. It is not protection. It transfers temporary control of my shipping routes if I am declared medically unfit or dead before midnight tomorrow. Bianca backed toward the wall. That clause protects both families. It protects yours, Matteo said. The poison was designed to weaken me. The hospital footage was created to frame Elena, and Vio was ordered to finish the job if I refused to sign. Once Elena was blamed, no one would look at the Morettis. Dr. Vale lowered his head. Bianca's polished calm finally cracked. You have no proof. Elena looked at the video still playing on her phone. Behind the masked figure beside her mother's bed, she saw a silver reflection in the dark window. It was not another person. It was the brass number plate from the hospital's unused rehabilitation wing, 2 floors below them. They are not on the rooftop, she said. Everyone turned. Elena enlarged the image. That room has the old mirrored windows from the west wing. My mother was moved downstairs, and they want us to take the elevator up so they can isolate Matteo. Matteo studied the screen, then looked at her with quiet approval. Vincent, send 2 men to the roof and make it appear we accepted the demand. The rest go to the rehabilitation wing. And you? Vincent asked. I go with Elena. No, Elena said. You stay here. That was not a request. Neither is this. She stepped closer until only inches separated them. You said I was not a weakness. Then do not treat me like one. My mother knows my voice. I can keep her calm, and I know that wing better than any of your men. Matteo's expression shifted. He was accustomed to obedience, but Elena was not challenging his power for pride. She was asking him to trust her strength. After a long second, he handed her a small communication device. You stay beside me. We face it together. They left the intensive care unit through a service corridor while Vincent's team moved ahead in silence. The lower floor was dark except for blue emergency lights along the walls. Elena could hear Matteo's breathing becoming heavier, but whenever she looked at him, he straightened as if pain were an enemy he refused to acknowledge. At the entrance to the abandoned therapy room, he caught her wrist gently. If anything changes, you leave with your mother. Not without you. Elena, you carried my badge for 11 years. Do not ask me to leave you now. For the first time that night, Matteo's guarded expression opened completely. He touched his forehead to hers for one brief second. Then stay behind me. They entered together. Elena's mother lay on a portable bed, awake but frightened, while a masked woman stood beside her holding a small remote device. 2 men guarded the doors. Matteo DeLuca, the woman said, sign the transfer agreement and Mrs. Brooks walks out. Matteo moved in front of Elena. Remove the mask. The woman obeyed. Elena recognized her immediately as Bianca's private assistant, Celeste Marino, the same woman who had visited her mother's room wearing the serpent bracelet. Celeste smiled. Bianca promised me control of the hospital contracts once your empire changed hands. She promised you something she never owned, Matteo said. Celeste raised the remote. This controls the lock on Mrs. Brooks' medication line. One press and she receives a dangerous dose. Elena noticed the tubing beside her mother's bed. The clamp was closed. The line was not connected to any medication bag. Celeste was bluffing. "You should have chosen a real nurse to stage this," Elena said. Then she stepped out from behind Matteo. "That line cannot deliver anything." Celeste looked down for half a second. It was enough. Vincent's men entered from both doors and disarmed the guards without firing a shot. Celeste tried to run, but Elena reached her mother first and pulled the bed away from danger. Matteo caught Celeste's wrist and took the remote, his face calm with fury. "You used an innocent woman to reach me." Celeste laughed bitterly. "Bianca said you would choose the alliance once you understood what Elena would cost you." Matteo looked toward the doorway as Bianca was escorted into the room. "Then she never understood me." Bianca lifted her chin. "Without my family, your council will remove you by sunrise." Matteo took the unsigned agreement from Vincent and tore it slowly in half. "Let them try." Bianca stared at him. "You would throw away everything for her?" Matteo crossed the room, took Elena's hand in front of everyone, and answered with the sentence no one expected. "I am not throwing away my empire. I am choosing the woman who saved the man inside it." Then Celeste smiled and revealed her final move. "You are too late. The council vote began. That photograph was taken before anyone knew Matteo would be poisoned." Elena's voice trembled as she held the picture beneath the harsh hospital lights, and for the first time since entering the room, Bianca Moretti looked genuinely afraid. Matteo saw it. He saw the tiny pause before she lifted her chin, the way her fingers moved toward the serpent bracelet hidden beneath the sleeve of her cream-coloured coat, and the way Dr. Harrison Vale avoided looking at her. "Vincent," Matteo said quietly, "lock the room." The door clicked shut. Rain struck the windows 20 floors above Manhattan while the monitor beside Matteo's bed kept a steady rhythm. Vincent forced Val into a chair, then placed the photograph on the table between them. "Start talking." Val's shoulders collapsed. "I never meant for anyone to die." Elena stared at him. "You prepared the second injection." "Because they had my daughter." He pulled out his phone and showed them a picture of a frightened teenage girl sitting in a dark room. A newspaper beside her displayed that morning's date. "A woman contacted me 3 weeks ago. She knew Matteo would attend the charity dinner. She told me to make sure he appeared too weak to lead, then let the poison finish the job if he refused the Moretti alliance." Bianca stepped forward. "That is a lie." Matteo's gaze moved to the silver serpent around her wrist. "Then explain the bracelet." "It is an old family symbol. Hundreds exist. But only members of the Moretti inner circle wear the silver version," Vincent said. Bianca's face tightened. Elena suddenly remembered the woman outside her mother's recovery room. She had worn a surgical mask, but her perfume had been expensive and sharp, the same scent now filling Matteo's hospital room. Elena looked at Bianca. "You were there." "I have never met your mother. You stood outside her door." Bianca gave a cold smile. "You are tired, frightened, and desperate to matter. Do not mistake imagination for evidence." The words landed exactly where Bianca intended. Elena looked down at her worn uniform and felt every old humiliation return at once, every laugh, every rejection, every person who had treated her body as proof that her voice carried less value. She started toward the door. "I need to check on my mother." Matteo swung his legs from the bed. Pain crossed his face and the monitor sounded a warning. "You are not leaving alone. You can barely stand. Then I will barely stand beside you." Elena turned. The most feared mafia boss in New York was pale, poisoned, and connected to an IV line, yet he was trying to rise because someone had threatened her family. Bianca laughed softly. "You are risking an empire for a nurse you met an hour ago." Matteo looked at Elena, not Bianca. "I did not meet her tonight." The room fell silent. Elena stopped breathing. Matteo reached beneath the collar of his hospital gown and removed a thin chain. Hanging from it was a small metal nursing school badge, scratched and darkened with age. Elena recognized the faded blue lettering immediately. Elena Brooks, student nurse. 11 years ago, Matteo said, I was found behind a closed restaurant in Brooklyn after an attack. I had lost too much blood. Everyone who passed kept walking because they were afraid of the men searching for me. Elena stared at the badge. A memory returned in broken images. Rainwater in an alley, a young man with blood on his shirt, her knees on wet pavement, and his hand crushing hers while she waited for an ambulance. You told me your name, Matteo continued. You kept me awake for 40 minutes. When I said I could not hold on, you told me I did not have to fight alone." Elena's eyes filled with tears. They were the same words she had whispered beside his bed tonight. "I never knew who you were. That was why I trusted you." His voice softened. "You helped me when my name meant nothing to you." Bianca's expression hardened. A sentimental memory does not make her innocent. "No," Matteo said. "Her actions do." Elena looked at him, overwhelmed by the realization that he had carried her badge for 11 years, while she had spent those same years believing she was forgettable. Matteo removed his black suit jacket from the chair and placed it gently around her shoulders. It hung heavily over her navy scrubs, warm from the room and carrying the faint scent of cedar. "Your mother will be protected," he said. "No one uses someone you love to control you." Elena wiped one tear before it could fall. "And no one uses me to control you. You have an alliance deadline tomorrow. If choosing me destroys your position, I will not let you do it." Matteo stepped closer. "Take your hand off him, Nurse Brooks. You are now the prime suspect in an attempted murder." Dr. Harrison Vale's accusation cut through the intensive care unit as 2 hospital security officers appeared at the doorway, but Elena did not release Matteo's hand. She stared at the frozen image on Vincent's phone, a full-figured woman in navy scrubs entering the pharmacy with Elena's badge clipped above her heart. The height was right. The uniform was right. Even the careful way the woman kept her face lowered looked convincing. Only Elena knew the truth. "That is not me," she said. Dr. Vale folded his arms. "The camera says otherwise. The camera shows someone dressed like me." One of the officers stepped forward. "Nurse Brooks, we need you to come with us." Matteo's fingers tightened around hers. His face was pale from the poison, but his voice carried the same controlled danger that had made judges, politicians, and criminals reconsider their words. "She is not going anywhere." "Mr. DeLuca," Vale said, "you are under medication. Your judgment may be impaired." Matteo looked at him without blinking. "Then imagine how unreasonable I will become when the medication wears off." Vincent quietly moved between Elena and the officers. No weapon was shown. No threat needed to be explained. Everyone understood that touching her would mean challenging a man who had survived 3 hours of dying and awakened with more authority than the entire hospital board. Elena leaned toward Matteo. "Do not make this worse for yourself. They have to investigate." "They are not investigating," he replied. "They are selecting the easiest person to blame." His eyes moved toward Vale, a night nurse with no powerful family, no expensive attorney, and a history of being ignored. Elena felt the words strike somewhere deep. He had known her for less than an hour, yet he had understood the pattern of her life more clearly than people who had known her for years. Dr. Vale gave a cold laugh. "You barely know this woman." "I know she stopped you from giving me a second contaminated injection." Vale's face tightened. "You cannot prove it was contaminated." Vincent lifted the sealed syringe from an evidence bag. "The private laboratory downstairs just confirmed a foreign compound in the fluid." Silence spread through the room. Elena looked from the syringe to Vale. "You said the dose came from the medication cabinet." "That is what I was told." "By whom?" Vale opened his mouth, then stopped. Matteo noticed. "Everyone leaves except Elena, Vincent, and Dr. Vale." The specialists hesitated until Vincent opened the door. Within seconds, the room emptied. Rain streaked the windows, and distant thunder rolled over Manhattan as Matteo studied the doctor. "Who handed you the syringe?" Vale adjusted his collar. "A nurse." "Which nurse?" Elena asked. "She wore a surgical mask. I assumed she belonged to this floor." Elena's stomach turned. "You accepted an unverified syringe for a critical patient?" "The unit was chaotic because your employer's men were intimidating everyone. He is not my employer." Vale glanced at their joined hands. "Then perhaps you should ask yourself why a dying mafia boss knew your name." Elena pulled her hand away, more from shock than fear. Matteo's expression darkened, but before he could answer, the door opened and a tall woman entered in a cream-coloured coat. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the storm, and diamonds flashed at her ears. She carried herself like the hospital belonged to her. "Matteo," she said, ignoring Elena completely. "I came as soon as I heard." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Bianca." Bianca Moretti was the daughter of one of the most influential crime families on the East Coast, and the woman newspapers had spent months calling Matteo's future bride. She approached the bed, but Matteo did not offer his hand. "Who allowed you onto this floor?" he asked. "Your board members are not the only people with influence." Bianca finally looked at Elena, slowly examining her worn shoes, curvy figure, and plain uniform. "Is this the nurse who poisoned you?" Elena recognized the cruelty hidden beneath the polished smile. "I did not poison anyone." "Of course not. Women like you usually seek attention in less ambitious ways." The insult was quiet, but every word was deliberate. Elena's face burned. Before she could answer, Matteo sat forward despite the pain twisting across his features. "Use her name." Bianca blinked. "Excuse me?" "Her name is Elena Brooks. You will speak it with respect, or you will leave." Bianca's smile vanished. "You are defending a stranger while our families are preparing to announce our engagement." Elena turned toward Matteo. "Engagement?" His silence answered before his words did. Matteo's eyes opened at 2:17 in the morning, and the first person he searched for was not a doctor, a bodyguard, or the man who had controlled his empire for 15 years. It was Elena. "Where is the nurse?" His voice was weak, but every person in the intensive care unit fell silent as though he had spoken from the head of a conference table instead of a hospital bed. Elena tried to pull her hand away, suddenly aware of how many powerful men were watching her, but Matteo's fingers tightened around hers. "She stays," he said. Dr. Harrison Vale stepped forward with a practiced smile. "Mr. DeLuca, you have suffered a serious medical crisis. Nurse Brooks interfered with treatment, and we need room to stabilize you." Matteo turned his head slowly. His dark eyes were still clouded by pain, yet the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You had 3 hours to stabilize me." No one answered. "She had 30 seconds. Dr. Vale's smile disappeared. Matteo looked at his second-in-command, Vincent Russo, a broad-shouldered man with silver at his temples and a scar along his jaw. "No one removes her from this room." Vincent nodded once. "Understood." Elena felt 12 pairs of eyes move toward her. Some were angry, some embarrassed, and one pair belonged to a young doctor who had laughed at her only minutes earlier. She wanted to feel victorious, but she only felt tired. "Mr. DeLuca, I did not save you," she said. Your heart rhythm responded to touch and voice. It was a grounding response. The doctors did the medical work. Matteo studied her as if honesty were a language he rarely heard. "They were preparing to announce my death. They were trying to keep you alive, and you are defending people who mocked you." Elena lifted her chin. "I am defending the truth." Something changed in his expression. It was not softness, not yet, but recognition. Matteo DeLuca had built his life around men who agreed with him because they feared him. Elena Brooks stood beside his bed with worn shoes, tired eyes, and no protection except her integrity, and she corrected him without trembling. His attention shifted to the medication tray. What did she notice? Dr. Vale cleared his throat. "There is no reason to discuss procedural details while you are recovering." Elena looked at the syringe beside the tray. His blood pressure fell after the first injection. The second dose was prepared before his chart was updated. The room became still again. Vincent moved closer to the tray. "Was that a mistake?" "Hospitals are chaotic," Dr. Val replied. "Mistakes happen." Matteo's gaze hardened. "Not around me." He released Elena's hand only to point at the door. "Clear the floor. No one enters without Vincent's approval. The medication, security footage, and staff records are to be preserved." Dr. Vale straightened. "You cannot take control of a hospital unit." Matteo looked at him. "I just did." Within minutes, the hallway outside the intensive care room changed. Hospital administrators arrived in pressed suits. Security guards were replaced at the entrance. Matteo's legal counsel contacted the board. No one raised a weapon or shouted, yet every order was obeyed because the wounded man in the bed possessed more influence from beneath a blanket than most people did from behind a desk. Elena watched uneasily. "You are frightening the staff. One of them may have helped poison me, and the others are innocent until proven otherwise." His eyes returned to her. "You always protect strangers? Only when powerful people forget strangers are human." Vincent glanced down, hiding the beginning of a smile. Matteo did not smile, but his voice lowered when he spoke again. "Sit down, Elena." It was the first time he said her name while fully conscious. She hesitated, then took the chair beside his bed. "How did you know my name before you opened your eyes?" For the first time, Matteo looked uncertain. His gaze moved to her badge, but Elena caught the delay. "I heard someone say it," he answered. "No one said it after I touched your hand." A warning flashed across Vincent's face, but Matteo remained silent. Elena noticed his breathing becoming uneven and reached toward the monitor. "Your pulse is rising. Because you ask too many questions. Then stop giving suspicious answers." The corner of his mouth almost moved. Before either of them could speak again, Vincent's phone vibrated. He read the message, and all warmth vanished from his face. "We checked the medication cabinet. The syringe prepared for the second injection did not come from hospital inventory." Elena stared at the tray. Dr. Valle stepped backward. "If he dies tonight, every person in this room will wish they had died first." The warning came from a man in a black suit as thunder shook the windows of St. Catherine's Hospital in Manhattan, but the 12 doctors surrounding the unconscious patient did not look afraid of the armed guards. They looked afraid of the patient. 38-year-old Matteo DeLuca was not merely rich, feared, and untouchable. He was the Mafia Boss whose name could silence a courtroom, empty a nightclub, or make powerful men suddenly remember urgent business in another state. Now he lay beneath white hospital lights with his skin pale, his breathing shallow, and every machine around him sounding more desperate by the second. Someone had slipped an unknown compound into his drink during a private charity dinner, and after 3 hours of tests, injections, and failed procedures, the best specialists in New York had run out of answers. His pulse kept dropping. His temperature had fallen to 94 degrees. His body rejected every medication they tried. Yet even unconscious, Matteo looked controlled, severe, and unreachable, like a man who had trained himself never to need anyone. Dr. Harrison Vale pulled off his gloves and spoke quietly to Matteo's second-in-command. "We may have 10 minutes." Across the room, Elena Brooks froze with a stack of clean blankets pressed against her chest. Elena was a 31-year-old night nurse with warm brown eyes, a soft round face, and a full-figured body that strangers seemed to believe gave them permission to judge her. She had spent years hearing patients praise thinner nurses while asking whether Elena was healthy enough to care for anyone. She had survived a broken engagement to a man who told her she would be beautiful if she lost 60 pounds. And she still sent half her paycheck to help her mother recover from surgery in Queens. She was exhausted, behind on rent, and carrying a private ache she never allowed to harden her kindness. That kindness was why she noticed what everyone else had missed. Matteo's right hand was clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "He can hear us," Elena said. Dr. Vale glanced at her badge, then at her body, and gave a humorless smile. "Nurse Brooks, bring the blankets and let the physicians work." Several people looked away, embarrassed for her, but Elena did not move. His heart rate changes whenever someone mentions the poisoning. He is not only unconscious, he is fighting something. "And you diagnosed that from the doorway?" A younger doctor asked. A few nervous laughs followed. Elena felt heat crawl up her neck. She knew that laugh. It was the same one she had heard in restaurants, fitting rooms, and family gatherings, the sound people made when they had already decided she did not belong. Then Matteo's monitor gave a sharp warning. His pulse slipped again. Dr. Valle ordered another injection. Elena looked at the dosage and stepped forward. "You already gave him that medication 20 minutes ago." "Move," the doctor snapped. His blood pressure dropped after the first dose. "Security," Dr. Valle said without looking at her. One of Matteo's guards approached, but before he could touch Elena, the Mafia Boss's hand jerked against the sheet. Everyone stopped. Elena set down the blankets and walked to the bed. "Mr. DeLuca, my name is Elena Brooks. I am a nurse. I am not going to hurt you." Dr. Vale reached for her arm, but Matteo's second-in-command blocked him. "Let her speak." Elena stood beside the most dangerous man in New York, close enough to see the faint scar near his temple and the exhaustion hidden beneath his hard features. She did not see a criminal legend. She saw a terrified patient trapped somewhere no one else could reach. Slowly, she placed her hand over his clenched fist. His skin was cold. "You do not have to fight alone," she whispered. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then his fingers loosened beneath hers. The monitor steadied, his temperature began to rise. Every doctor stared as Matteo DeLuca took his first deep breath in 3 hours. Elena looked down, stunned, and his hand suddenly closed around hers with impossible strength. His eyes remained shut, but one word escaped his lips, rough and broken. Elena. She had never met him before, yet the Mafia Boss knew her name.